Okay, this is the second video in our 8th week of Church History 1, and the Forerunners to the Reformation. I'm going to talk about 5 individuals, and the last 2 of which are John Wycliffe and John Huss, the 2 most important Forerunners, but 3 others: Peter Waldo, Dominic Guzman, and St. Francis of Assisi. Now, something is happening in all of these, particularly these last 3, Waldo, Dominic, and Francis, in which two characteristics seem to be dominant. They are preaching in poverty. There is a rising up of a desire to preach the word. Peter Waldo sent out individuals preaching. Dominic, who preached to the Cathars, which is a forerunner of the present-day Christian Scientists. Dominic's entire monastic order is devoted to preaching. And, of course, St. Francis of Assisi, the great example of poverty and devotion and preaching. I won't go into depth with these, but Peter Waldo founded a group called the Waldensians. In fact, there are groups even today on the East Coast of the United States that are Waldensian churches. The Dominicans is a Catholic order that derives from Dominic Guzman, Saint Dominic, and of course the Franciscans, and we hear about them, the Poor Clares, which is the women's branch of that. And I just commend these to you as examples of individuals within Catholicism and they remained completely within Catholicism. The Waldensians were approved by the Pope. Ultimately, they fell into disfavor. The Dominicans and the Franciscans did not. But they were indicative of a new desire to react against just the opulent wealth of the papacy and the carnality of it, and to preach the word. So let's talk for a few moments about Wycliffe and about Huss. John Wycliffe was a brilliant man. He's called a morning star of the Reformation. He was in England, taught at Oxford, and again, his primary question had to do with authority. Who has authority? Dominion is what he would talk about it. He, piece by piece, began to take apart the flaws in the Roman system. The ultimate that got him into the deepest trouble was when he declared that transubstantiation is not the truth. In other words, he believed in something of a spiritual presence in the Lord's Supper, but not a real presence. He believed that spiritually there was the communication of grace through communion, but it was not literally the body and blood of the Lord. For that, he was banished. He was kicked out of Oxford. Ultimately, he raised up preachers that went out. They were called the Lollards because they mumbled. They mumbled the Lord's Prayer. They mumbled the quotations of Scripture. And they went throughout the countryside preaching. Once again, preaching. There was not so much poverty with Wycliffe's followers as it was the preaching of the Word. And the morning star of the Reformation, there's an eloquent thing that was written about Wycliffe, a later chronicler, and you have this in the notes that you can download from Moodle. Wycliffe died in 1415, and later that year there was a council in Constance, October 8th, 1415. They hated him so much that they condemned him 260 charges, dug his bones up and burned them. And then they strew his ashes on the river Swift. That's the name of the river Swift. A later chronicler wrote this: "They burned his bones. They burned his bones to ashes and cast them into the Swift, neighboring brook running hard by. Thus the brook conveyed his ashes into the Avon into the Severn into the narrow seas, and they into the main ocean." So the ashes of Wycliffe are symbolic of his doctrine, which is now spread throughout the world. Wycliffe. Now, not long after that, over in what would be the present-day Czech Republic, city of Prague, a man by the name of John Huss rose up, and he believed the truths that Wycliffe had so eloquently written about and preached about. And he pastored a church there, and he began to preach also, and he sent out preachers, and of course he fell under the ban of the church also, and his major declaration was that Christ, not the Pope, is the head of the church, and that in fact they said that the church could exist without the Pope. And that was, of course, anathema to Roman Catholicism. He, in every way, began to critique and criticize the way the church was being operated. Now remember, as one line goes down, another line is going up. And we find this in Wycliffe and in Huss particularly. So ultimately, he was called to a council, once again at Constance, and to give a defense of himself. This was, in fact, the council that condemned Wycliffe. And he came and expecting that he would be able to give a defense of himself. Instead, they threw him into jail. And the way the Inquisition took place at that time, if they had enough accusations accusations against someone, they did not need your testimony at all. They simply wanted you to fess up to what everybody else was saying anyway. Well, Huss said, "I haven't preached some of the things they say I've preached. I have preached some, but not those things." And they didn't allow him to speak. Ultimately, he was sentenced to be burned to death. And so they took him out. And now what I'm about to share with you is, again, anecdotal, but by all indications in history, this in fact did take place. John Huss, his name in the Czech tongue, Huss means goose. That's the meaning of it. And so whenever they carried him to the pyre to be burned, it was said that the executioner said, "Now we will cook the goose." John Huss. Huss's reply, as it is reported to us, "Yes, you will cook this goose, but there will come a swan in 100 years that you will not reach." That was 1415. 102 years later, Martin Luther nailed the 95 Theses to the Wittenberg door. It is of interest that the predominant image of Martin Luther that you will find is that of a swan. And so Huss died a martyr's death and served God well in his day as he prepared for the breaking forth of light that would be the Protestant Reformation. God bless you as we conclude this course, and as we move forward, may we serve God well in our day as they did in theirs. God bless you.